Here we go, week 7. This is the best week in college football ever. So let's talk about it.
We doing everything they talk about. You know I'm everything a boss about. Not putting work and gotta toss them out. I'm really biting, they just barking out. I'm really riding, they just parking now. His street, what to talk about. See the big H when I'm walking out. Yeah.
Here we go. Welcome to the Athletes Forum podcast. Thank you all for coming back, supporting, dropping comments, liking, and subscribing, talking college football with me. I appreciate your support. So let's keep that thing going. Hey, we've made it to the best week ever in college football, week 7. There are a ton of crazy slates, good games that we're going to talk about. We're going to dive into a little bit. I got my notes because it's definitely a lot we're going to discuss here. We're going to talk about some of the matchups. And, here, let me bring it up for you right here. Some of the matchups we got this week. And then at the end, I'll give you some – I'm going to create a parlay with all these games. And let's throw this one up here because I want to add that Colorado-Kansas State game, that little nightcap. I'm going to throw in a parlay for DraftKings, and we're going to bet it. We're going to see if it hits. But, we'll mess around it. So if you want to play along, let me know what you think about the games and about the parlay. DraftKings is down right now. But once that gets back up, I'll post it, and then we'll see how everything goes. But week 7, man, it doesn't get no better than this. A lot of top matchups, especially coming off of last week's where it was like 5 upsets in the top 11, 5 teams I ended up losing. Maybe some trap games. Looking forward to this week. We'll see, but we're going to see how a lot of teams bounce back. So I don't want to waste too much more of your time, but let's dive into it. All right, here we go. First game we want to dive into, Red River, Texas versus Oklahoma. This has always been a classic. Both teams have a bye at the same time preparing for this game. This is the Texas State Fair. Does Texas slip in this one? And that's my question heading into this matchup. Does Texas slip up in this one? Usually over the past couple of years, it's always been, is Texas back? Are they back? And they've always found that one game where they just slip up. Obviously, we saw they play versus Michigan earlier in the year. Doesn't at the time thought it was a great win, but basically how Michigan has played, not really having an identity. That win may diminish just a little bit, but we'll see how everything goes in that capacity. So Red River, Oklahoma, a little bit of a quarterback controversy. They're starting their freshman quarterback, Michael Hawkins Jr. A little bit more mobile. Gives him a little bit of a different spark on offense. I think they're looking for something that Caleb Williams was able to do when he was able to come in and relieve Spencer Rattler and be able to create plays. And they ended up beating Texas a couple of years ago. We're going to see if Michael Hawkins Jr. can do the same thing. This game is always, regardless, you could throw records out the window. This game has always been interesting for the fact that you have one team that's real good and they come in and they think they're going to be dominant and they're losing. Obviously, last year, Dylan Gabriel, now at Oregon, comes in, rushed for 100. They upset Texas in Red River last year. Oklahoma, let's see my notes here. So we got true freshmen. I think one thing Oklahoma needs to do is have a better blocking scheme offensively. When they played Tennessee, their offensive game plan wasn't really great. They didn't really move the ball. They didn't really, they wasn't really drawing up schemes to protect their quarterback and allow him to make the plays necessary. And you're going to need that versus a Texas defense that is stout up front. This might be Sarkisian's best defensive line he's had since he's been at Texas. And how are they going to overcome that? Maybe a little bit of zone read, maybe get the quarterback out of the pocket a little bit, allow him to use his legs and be more mobile. If you just allow him to stand, you just allow Michael Hawkins Jr. to just stand in the pocket and try to dice up Texas, is not going to happen. When you look at Texas, good last year, and they thought they were great. And obviously, we talked about that slip-ups. They are great this year. They are well-balanced. They have a backup quarterback who could start for probably a lot of other top teams in the country. And speaking of that, I don't know who's playing quarterback, if it's Arch or Quinn Ewers. But drop a comment. Let me know what you guys think who's playing quarterback. Strong up front defensively, fast. Experience on the back end. Defense is going to make it hard for Oklahoma in this game. To be honest, when it comes down to this matchup, I trust Sark. I trust what Texas has looked like this year despite the competition. But again, they always find that game to slip up. The line for this game is 2 touchdowns. I think it's 14.5. But I'm going to rock with for my Athletes Forum podcast DraftKings parlay. I'm going to take over 50.5. I think when these two teams always meet, there's always a lot of points scored. So I'm going to rock with the trend 50.5. I think Texas wins, but I don't know if I want to go with the 2-point spread. So I'm going to take over 50.5 for Red River. All right. So we got the over in the Texas-Oklahoma game. Next one we want to dive into, Penn State USC. Who is finally going to get over the hump? You feel like these two teams have kind of been like getting close, whether it was USC in the Pac-12, now going to the Big Ten, whether it's Penn State in the Big Ten, who's always couldn't get past Michigan, couldn't get past Ohio State. Actually, if it was a 12-team playoffs for the past decade, Penn State would have made the playoffs 6 times, but they just hadn't been able to get over the hump. Which team finally gets over the hump? All right, James Franklin. I know him very well. I know him since he was a coach at Maryland. He was an offensive coordinator before going to Vanderbilt, and now he's at Penn State, obviously. And then you got Lincoln coming off a bad loss last week versus Minnesota. If I'm going to be honest, when you look at matchups, this is not a good matchup for USC. Not a good matchup for USC. USC, they're starting a lot of freshmen on the offensive line. And those guys are going to develop, but they struggle against a pass rush. And Abdul Carter, who wears the double sticks, number 11 for Penn State. If you go back, a lot of legendary linebackers have wore that. We go back to LeVar Arrington and Micah Parson and a couple other guys. So Abdul Carter, who wears the double six for Penn State, is a monster. He's going to be the best defensive lineman those USC tackles have faced all year. And granted, they struggled a little bit versus LSU, but they were able to overcome that. Had some problems versus Michigan. We saw how that panned out. How do they handle the pass rush for Penn State if you're USC? We'll see how Lincoln plans to overcome that. Lincoln's always been doubted for not being physical enough. Defensively, how are you going to stop the run with Nick Singleton for Penn State leading in that backfield? We'll see if Lincoln brings in tight ends, brings in extra backs just to give Millimore some more time. But it's going to be critical you get the ball in Zachariah Branch's hands this game, because you're going to need a playmaker. You're going to need a spark. You're going to need to find ways to control the game, keep that defense on the field, right? And really, really have a good defensive game plan. And you're home. You got Penn State traveling across country to play in this game. How are you going to find a way to bounce back? I'll tell you what. If USC loses, their playoff chances are done. I wouldn't say they're out of it just yet, because a win versus LSU, a win versus Penn State will still keep you in, especially if they could win out despite making the Big Ten championship because of their schedule. You get a win versus Penn State here, your chances are still in there to make the playoffs. But obviously, one of the main things we're going to stop the run. When you look at the Penn State side, Drew Allard, what a change in terms of development from last year. He's a guy that is Dyson from the pocket, honestly, and he has a run game to go with it. That Penn State offensive line, there's clips of them just dogging and mauling UCLA defenders last week. Like I said, I don't think this is a good matchup at all for USC. I think, when you look at Penn State, they're going to run the ball. USC struggles with that. Drew Allard, we were talking about, he has that experience. Penn State's junior class, when they were freshmen, this was known as the best freshman class James Franklin has ever brought in. Now they're juniors, they're grown men, they're adults now. Is this the year for Penn State? We'll see. But which team finally gets over the hump is the question I have for this game. Two teams looking to finally make their mark. This is going to be a statement game one way or another. The line right now is -4 Penn State. Although I think Penn State will cover, I'm more confident with the total being at 50.5. I think both these teams are going to find ways to put up points. So I'm going to go over 50.5 Penn State USC. Penn State, I'm not even going to say Penn State wins. I think they could win. I think they could cover. But I also think USC could find a way to make this interesting. And a reason why I think that is because of how they play versus LSU. So with that being said, I'm more comfortable with the total, going 50.5, going over 50.5 for this game. All right, next game we're going to dive into. This one's personal. This one is personal. Let's go Gators, baby. Hey, we're 3-2. They seem to be heading in a better direction, but we haven't even got the brunt of the schedule, and I'm talking about Florida. Florida plays Tennessee. Just some stats in this game. Florida, 16.5 point underdog for this game. In the last 19 games, Florida has beat Tennessee 17 times. Now, what does that mean? I don't know. But Florida has won 17 times in the past 19 games. Jeremy Bryson, I hope you like that stat. Who is Florida? Is this game going to save Billy Napier? Because obviously there have been talks about Billy Napier and his career and this, how's this team supposed to look? What is Florida? I think this is the game we're going to find out what Florida actually is. If you I'm not even going to say it's okay to lose, but if you lose, how you lose is going to either continue the narrative that Billy has to go, or maybe change the narrative how they play versus here, maybe there is some improvement. Where Florida has to win, they have to win a line of scrimmage. Tennessee has a good DN, James Pierce Jr., who is a beast. You either have to find ways to keep him off Graham Hurts and DJ Lagway. I need a big game from Trey Wilson. I know he had a big game last year. I need DJ Lagway to use his legs in this game because that's going to cause conflict versus Tennessee. Use a lot of mixed direction. Tennessee has a very fast defense, so get those guys to run sideline to sideline. Use that eye candy that Billy Napier likes to do. Make those guys be disciplined, and keep. If you're on defense, keep the ball in front because Nico for Tennessee, Ian Malalaba is going to throw that thing. He's going to try to spread. He's going to try to stretch the field downfield. We got to find a way to keep him off balance, make the pocket a little bit crowded, and find ways to slow him down read wise. Tennessee, on the other hand, you just lost to Arkansas, second road game where Nico and that Tennessee offense hasn't looked great on the road. I wish they didn't lose to Arkansas because now we're gonna get a refocused Tennessee team. They got to get Dylan Sampson involved more. He's a running back. Have him tote the rock. Have him, if they find ways to get him involved, play action, and continue to use those wide splits, it's going to be a long day for Florida. And they got to win up, and Tennessee has to win up front in order to win this game. Again, line 16.5. I even think the total in this game is kind of low. I think it's like 53.5. But Florida, 2-touchdown underdog, going to Tennessee, rival game. Never really trust that line. I'm going to take Florida plus 16.5 in this game. Maybe it's a homer pick, maybe it's not. Rivalry games, primetime games, heavy line favorites, usually favored the underdog. I'm going with Florida. Go Gators. And hopefully Tennessee doesn't pull it off. All right. What's the next thing we got on the slate? We got I feel like this is the game Oregon's kind of been waiting for since the season started. It's kind of been talked about since joining the Big Ten that they're going to get Ohio State. But Ohio State goes to Oregon. Former Oregon coach Chip Kelly, now offensive coordinator at Ohio State, goes back to Oregon, this time in the offensive coordinator type of role. This game's usually a bowl game. We usually get in Rose Bowl. Big Ten, Pac-12 champions will usually get this type of game. Now it's going to be a yearly or every other year type of thing in the Big Ten. Who has the better defense? That's what it's going to come down to. Right now, Ohio State on paper has the best defense, I think, in college football. With what they're giving up 3.5 yards per play. I think that's the best statistic you could judge a defense by if you're just looking at stats. All right, Oregon struggled a little bit in the year, kind of got things rolling, but how you gonna stop the run? How are you gonna stop Junkins and Henderson? Because Chip Kelly, all he wants to do is run the ball, and he's gonna find ways to give those guys the rock. All right, if you're Oregon, you've been having O-line struggles over the past couple of weeks. They've been able to fix those up a little bit, but now you're playing a veteran defensive line that's gonna get after you. All right, how do you protect Dillon Gabriel so you can keep him clean and he could throw the pocket? Dillon Gabriel last week versus Michigan State. Couple turnovers, especially a couple turnovers in the red zone. Can't have that this week versus Ohio State. You will lose. You will lose by a lot if you have those because Ohio State is good enough where they don't make you play. The thing I like about Oregon is their secondary. Good defense, better secondary, which is good because if you let freshman sensation Jeremiah Smith or even Emeka Egbuka have a day, man, Alton Stadium's going to get very quiet. Very quiet. And last note I have for Oregon, this is the game I feel like they've been waiting for. They kind of been it feels like they've been looking ahead to this game towards Big Ten play, and they just had to get past a couple of weeks. You got past Michigan State, you got past Boise. Idaho was obviously a scare. We'll see, but this is the game here. Number 2, Ohio State versus number 3, Oregon. And a lot of people had Oregon as favorites to win the Natty. So, which defense is better? And on the Ohio State side, they're going to run the ball. All right. We already talked about their defense and how veteran that team is. A lot of those guys came back. They could have went to the NFL. Emeka Buka and Smith have been having seasons. This is going to be – I think this is a bad matchup for Oregon. I think just because when they play Boise State, Heisman candidate as of right now, the running back for Boise State, his name's missing me right now, ran for like 198 yards. Alton Gentry, something like that. Gentry from Boise State. This time you're in the two-headed monster with Ohio State. That's going to lead me to Ohio State. It's -3. To be honest, I think they win by maybe a touchdown. I just think Ohio State's better. I'm going to take Ohio State -3 for the Athletes Forum DraftKings parlay in this one. All right. By the way, shout out to DraftKings. Free promo here on the DraftKings. All right. 2 more games we want to get through. All right. This was a classic last year. Ole Miss versus LSU. Who has the better quarterback? That's all it comes down to in this one. Who has the better quarterback? Also, which coach do you trust? Lane Kiffin gave up a stinker versus Kentucky. LSU, right? Almost lost to South Carolina, but they did lose to USC, and we see how USC is now. These coaches always find Lane Kiffin and Brian Kelly always seem to kind of find a way in big games to not live up to the hype. At least that's what it seems like. You can even go back to Brian Kelly and Notre Dame game when he played Alabama and Miami, and they got blown out. The Manti Te'o team, right? So we'll see. So which quarterback is better? Which coach do you trust? For Ole Miss, last year they won a classic. Fans stormed the field. All right. It was a great game. Passing game, they're one of the tops in the country with averaging at least 11 yards per pass. All right. Just think every time they throw a pass, it's a first down. All right. How does LSU defend that? LSU is supposed to be DBU. How do you defend the pass game and keep Jackson Dart, on the ground instead of upright? It's gonna be interesting to see how that see. With Ole Miss's passing game, the reason why they struggle versus Kentucky because they didn't really connect on those deep passes. Lane's gonna take shots. Jackson Dart's gonna take shots. All right. Again, if you're LSU, how do you defend that? How do you keep the ball in front? Harold Perkins, your top DN/linebacker, he's out. He's out for a little bit. So what are you gonna do? You're coming off a bye, right? You've had some time to get ready for this game. All right. So, we'll see. A win for Ole Miss will kind of revenge their season, especially coming off what they did versus, again, Kentucky team. A win versus LSU will revenge that Kentucky loss, I think. If you're LSU, you got to apply pressure. Your D-line has to apply pressure. You got to win third down, I think, in order to keep Ole Miss out of rhythm because they get in rhythm. It's going to be a long day. If you let Jackson Dart and Lane Kiffin get in rhythm, it's going to be a long day. Long day at the office. Kyron Lacy, big wide receiver. He needs to have a big game. He seems like he's the next for LSU great receivers. You talk about your Justin Jefferson. You talk about your Jamar Chase, Brian Thomas, Malik Neighbors. That is Kyron Lacy for this LSU team. And we'll see. The line for this game is 3.5 Ole Miss, over under at 61. I think Ole Miss wins this game. I think they're just better than LSU. Even though they say LSU at night is a dangerous place to go to, from what I've heard and what I've seen, you can agree. I think Ole Miss finds a way. So I'm taking Ole Miss -3.5, and I'm hammering the over 61.5 for sure. Over 61.5. All right. Last game we want to get into. We got to talk about them. It's not a show. It's not a week. We don't talk about the Buffs. This game is basically for the Big 12 at the moment. Kansas City State coming off a loss a couple weeks ago versus BYU. We can't forget about Iowa State, who's currently undefeated and is a top 10 team right now. But this right here, this game is for the Big 12 in terms of leaderboards. if Colorado could beat Kansas State, this says a lot about Colorado, says a lot about the Big 12, and you can almost possibly look at a Colorado, BYU, Iowa State, Big 12 championship. We'll see. If you're Kansas State, Avery Johnson, dual threat quarterback, you got to use your legs. You got to use your legs per usual. But also, you can't let you can't play Colorado's game, because if you start getting into a pass matchup when you're trying to go score for score, it's gonna get interesting. It's gonna get interesting. I think that favors Colorado because that's what they want to do. One thing to point out: Kansas State head coach comes from North Dakota State, comes from that pedigree. We saw what North Dakota State did to Colorado week 1. Does Kansas State go back to maybe that formula, right? And maybe use some of what they did to game plan versus Colorado, right? Colorado struggled a little bit versus QB runs. Obviously, KJ Jefferson, North Dakota State. Avery Johnson's a different animal. Avery Johnson's their best running quarterback they're going to face all year. There's no doubt about it. We'll see how that pans out. Dylan Edwards, former Colorado running back, right? Goes back home, plays for Kansas State. Now he's coming back to play in Colorado. Defensively, who do you defend? This is as simple as that. Travis Hunter. Let's say you take Travis Hunter away. Do you have the guys to pair up with LaJohntay Webster? Do you have the guys to pair up with Will Shepard? Or don't forget about Jimmy Horn Jr., right? How do you defend the weapons of Colorado? And if you're Colorado, like you gotta make sure you contain Avery Johnson in this game. You can't let quarterback runs beat you, because they, essentially they will. But also, you got to be able to – this is going to be the biggest game in Colorado since Deion Sanders has been there, right? You got to show improvement. Coming off a bye week, too, you got to show improvement. You can't let that win versus UCF carry over to this game, because if it does, how much growth and development are we actually seeing at this point? We'll see. But make Kansas State player game. Shiloh Sanders is going to be returning back for Colorado. Safety, I'm sure that's a big game for them. I'm picking Colorado. They're underdogs. I'm picking Colorado on the money line. I just think at home, this team seems a little different. Even though they were 4-1 last year, this team seems a little different. I think Colorado takes this one over Kansas State. This is the Athletes Forum podcast, DraftKings parlay for the best week in college football, week 7. DraftKings, you get the free sponsor here. Texas versus Oklahoma, over 50.5. Penn State versus USC, over 50.5. Florida, Tennessee, Florida plus 16.5, right? Ohio State versus Oregon, Ohio State -3. LSU versus Ole Miss -3.5, and we're going over 61.5 points. Colorado on the money line. Let's see if this hits. If it hits, we'll see maybe we go to Europe or something. And I'm going to throw in the Barstool. Shout out to Barstool. You get the free sponsor. 50% parlay booster. I'll post this on Friday. You let me know what you guys think. We'll see the payout. We'll see if it hits.